Hey guys, Dan here. Welcome to Dan Reviews It. This is our TV news and reviews for the week. We've got 6 new shows for you to talk about and a couple of news fragments as well. So let's get it started. Not a ton of news this week, but a couple of interesting tidbits, some renewals and cancellations. The renewals, we can breeze through those. Tamron Hall and her talk show have been renewed for Season 3. This is one I never got to review it. It premiered like pretty much right when I started doing this show, and I'm not even sure who runs it locally here, so never got around to reviewing it, but it obviously does very well for the syndicated market, so that is coming up on Season 3 for next fall, so we're almost a whole year ahead of that. And then speaking of very early renewals, Dickinson over at Apple TV Plus is going to get a 3rd season as well. This is a show that I reviewed pretty favorably when Apple TV Plus first started, and it was, I think, on the higher end of my grades, but Haley Steinfeld stars as Emily Dickinson, and Season 2 has already been filmed and will be going up in January on the streamer. So then we can look forward to Season 3 probably coming in 2022, but a very early pickup for that. But the cancellations, I think, are more interesting, so I want to spend a little bit of time on these. They're both shows that were previously renewed for a new season, and then because of COVID-19 and everything being shut down and rising costs to continue production with the necessary adjustments in place to get through the pandemic, 2 shows have been canceled. One of them is a little bit less, I think, newsworthy, but it was nominated for some awards. It won a Peabody, and that is Kirsten Dunst's show on becoming a central god in Florida. Now, this started airing before I was doing the weekly reviews, so I've not seen it. I think it started off as a YouTube show, but when YouTube stopped being in the scripted market, it shifted gears and went to Showtime. And I think that's where the first season originally aired. But either way, Showtime was going to produce Season 2. That is not happening now due to mainly scheduling conflicts, is what they have said. Which makes sense, because when you have a series with, a lot of people in it, sometimes with, 9 months of being shut down, you can't really get everybody together. Now, that's not necessarily the case for the other biggie, which is Glow on Netflix. This was a huge deal because it already had been approved for a 4th season, which in Netflix, the Netflix world, is pretty rare. We talk about this semi-regularly here on the show, that most Netflix shows anymore don't get past 3 seasons unless they're, a really big, popular show, and then maybe a 4th, maybe a 5th if they're lucky, but, I don't know. It's definitely rare these days, but Glow had a strong enough fan base, they were going to do a 4th and probably final season. I forget if they officially said, yes, this will be the last season or not, but they had already filmed 2 episodes completely, and I guess written the whole season. I mean, it was approved, or renewed, I should say, a long time ago. So they had already finished 2 complete episodes. Whether they will ever see the light of day, I don't know. But essentially, they were citing things like the fact that, there's 17 cast members on this show, which is a lot for any show. I mean, that's more than I think even SNL has in their regular rotation. And then, in addition to that, the amount of physical activity that the gals do, it just would have been very, very hard for them to really put the show together as it should have been without spending a ton of extra money on the stipulations needed to be approved, really, with all the COVID restrictions. And so the article I read sort of a follow-up about why all these shows are being unrenewed, is the new term. Things like Stumptown, which we talked about recently, and obviously these 2 for this week. And there's been a few others in the pipeline as well. Netflix has done it to a couple other shows. USA did it to the Evel Knievel show, which that was more of a scheduling conflict because it was Milo Ventimiglia, and he was going to film it over the summer on his break from This Is Us. Obviously, that never happened, so USA just kind of said, all right, just go back to This Is Us. Like, we'll forget the show. But in a case like Glow, so apparently the costs per episode during the pandemic to get by all of the restrictions is anywhere from $300,000 to $500,000 extra per episode. So, when you're looking at something like Glow from Netflix, which already has a pretty hefty price tag because, number one, Netflix doesn't own the show like they do with a lot of their shows. So they have to pay a licensing fee anyway. But then on top of that, they have all these restrictions in place that they now have to pay extra to make sure they're in coordinates with. But on top of all of that, Glow specifically has all of the physical scenes and the wrestling and all of that stuff. And it just became a matter of this is sort of impossible to get around and to have the show ready before like 2022. And Netflix sort of made the decision that, well, by 2022, it's going to be 2.5 years from the previous season. Who's going to care anymore? The truth is, I think a lot of people, because people were very upset about this news. But what's nice is Glow had a panel the other day. I think it might have been Friday night, with all 17 cast members doing like a virtual get out the vote kind of thing. And this was a scheduled event. This was a planned event before the cancellation. So they went through with it. But in that discussion about voting and about everything else, including the cancellation of the show, they had said that, you can send all these hashtags out and make Netflix aware that, you want to see the show, like Save Glow or something like that. But you can also, write them letters, send them emails, whatever. But they also floated the idea of maybe a wrap-up movie. If they can't get a full 4th season, maybe air the 2 episodes that already were shot and then do some sort of wrap-up movie and make it, if it's a 2-hour movie, then you make it like a 3-hour sort of event. And honestly, I've heard worse ideas. A lot of the final seasons of shows are sort of cut in half anyway. Kimmy Schmidt was technically broken into 2 6-part seasons, or two 6-episode halves of one season. So it was 12 episodes technically, but they aired like 8 months apart in 6-episode chunks. Glow could certainly do 4 more episodes, aka the length of a TV movie, add it to the 2 that was already, that already are in existence, and who knows if we'll ever see them, and then just make it a 3-hour event. Like, I think that would satisfy people, even if it's not ready till 2022, I think that would, satisfy the audience enough. And look, it's not like people are going to drop Netflix because they don't have Glow anymore. Like, it's one of these things where it's not something like Stranger Things or The Mandalorian for Disney Plus, where people that may not subscribe to the service will get it for that item. Glow is popular, but it's not quite in that pantheon, so I don't think they're going to lose any subscribers for not having a season 4, and yet they're going to be shelling out all this money to keep it going. Like, I don't know. But I think it would be a nice goodwill gesture. Glow has gotten a lot of attention for Netflix over the years, some awards love, and obviously some really, critical raves about this show. I think it would be very nice if they were to do a TV movie. So we'll see. But I didn't quite realize, it was an extra nearly $500,000 an episode now with these all these restrictions to be, complicit with all the rules. So I didn't quite realize that. That's look, when you look at a network show like ABC, like they were going to, originally do Stumptown. Stumptown has 22 episodes. That's millions and millions of extra dollars that, just doesn't quite seem worth it for a show that was sort of on the bubble anyway. I love Stumptown. I'm sorry to see it go, but, certainly I can understand, like, we as, lay people don't really understand sometimes that, look, these decisions are all due to finances. We get that, but I certainly didn't quite know how much more they had to spend just to be complicit in all the new regulations out there. I did not know that. So, but speaking of Netflix originals like Glow, so this is an interesting thing where we've got something from Netflix going to broadcast television. That does not happen very often. Now, of course, One Day at a Time, when it got canceled, went to Pop TV, but again, that was something that was owned by Sony and not by Netflix outright. But Gilmore Girls, A Day in the Life. This is originally, of course, from the Gilmore Girls show that started on the WB back in the 90s when it was the WB, and then the last few seasons aired on the CW. Well, CW has bought the rights to the Netflix miniseries Gilmore Girls, A Year in the Life. This aired, I think, 3 years ago, maybe even longer, maybe 4 years ago. But it aired several years ago at this point, and there's never been an official word on if it's coming back for a new season or not. There was sort of talk shortly after it aired that, like, hey, these numbers are great. The Palladinos who created it were all on board with getting another year in the life or something. Personally, I think one was enough. There were 4 episodes of really sort of movie length. I mean, they were about an hour and a half each. And one of them was terrible. 2 of them were like okay or fairly good, and then one of them was pretty solid. So I don't think I ever gave the show a grade, but I think it would be maybe in that B minus type range. It's certainly not anything amazing, but look, it's a fitting tribute and end to some of these characters that we loved. I felt like a lot of things were shoehorned in to get some of the greatest hits going, but okay. But the CW is going to run this around Thanksgiving, which sort of makes sense. Obviously, Thanksgiving's a very family-heavy holiday, and the Gilmore Girls all about the family. But yeah, I mean, usually we don't see Netflix programming or any streamer programming going outside that bubble. Like, on occasion, we'll have DVD releases. Not as much these days, but back, when they first started, we had a DVD release of House of Cards and Orange is the New Black and Grace and Frankie and Stranger Things and all of that. And some of the other streamers, I think, have DVD releases as well. But for the most part, they sort of just stay in that streamer zone. But this is interesting. I don't know what the ratings are going to be like. I mean, CW never gets great ratings anyway, but people can also watch it for free for the 30 days after it first airs, and that's going to be on the CW app. And it's going to be a 4-night event because, like I said, they're all almost movie length. So when you add in commercials, they're going to be 2 hours apiece. And it starts on the 23rd. I don't know if it's going one night after the other, or they're going to skip a night here or there to put on Swamp Thing or whatever else they're running. But it's sort of an interesting idea to fill some of the gaps in programming that networks are faced with. And since Gilmore Girls was originally a WB property, then CW, it does make sense that they would sort of want this. I can't imagine there's any big Gilmore Girls fans that haven't already seen this. Like, this is something that you would have ordered Netflix for, even just for the 30-day trial and then cancel it, just to watch the Gilmore Girls Year in the Life. I would think. But, if people kind of forgot about it or whatever, it's sort of a nice way to sort of remind everybody about this and maybe create buzz for a second miniseries. I don't know. But all right, so I've been running a little long the last few weeks with my TV news and review show. So let's get off the news already and let's have our reviews. Like I said, we've got 6 new shows for you, and they sort of really run the gamut of some are streamers, some are broadcast, some were originally going to be on or originally were on something else and then were bought. Because, again, we're trying to fill holes here. So, yeah, the first thing we're going to talk about is Utopia. This is, a show that really is getting a lot of buzz. It is an Amazon Prime original, and it's based on a British show of the same name from about 7 years ago. And Gillian Flynn is the one who adapted it. She did Gone Girl and Sharper Things or something. I forget what it's called. I think it's Sharper Things. But she did not write the book for this. It's based on Utopia by Dennis Kelly. He's the original book author. But but she has adapted it for American audiences, and it is a very, very interesting show. It's a sci-fi show that definitely has some violence to it, certainly mystery, some drama for sure. And I don't know where it's going to quite go. I just watched the first episode, and in this show, the basic plot is a group of young adults who meet online, find out about this cult underground graphic novel, which is called Utopia, and it's sort of the holy grail, basically, of these comic collectors and graphic novel collectors, and basically they find themselves trapped at this sort of Comic-Con thing. This, I forget what it's called in the show, but it's basically Comic-Con, but more for graphic novels and stuff. And in that, we have a lot of people trying to get their hands on this comic, and we don't quite know why yet, but there's certainly a lot of heavy conspiracy theories towards it, and is it mirroring real life? We don't know yet, and it goes from there. But a lot of death just in the first episode alone, trying to get a hold of this comic. It shifts hands many times, and we don't quite know yet why it's so important. In fact, the quote-unquote star of the show, John Cusack, isn't even in the first episode. We haven't met him yet. But we've met many people that we know from other things, including Jessica Rothe, who is the gal from Happy Death Day and those movies. Also Dan Bird, who played Courtney Cox's son in Cougar Town. We've seen him in a couple other things. And Desmond Borges as well, who was in You're the Worst. So, some people in this that we've seen before. Although John Cusack, I don't know, when he's going to show up. There's only, 8 episodes, so I guess we'll find out. But it's certainly interesting. I think of all the things I've watched for this week's show, I'd say it's got to be the most original, certainly. However, there's a couple of things I find flaw with right off the bat, just from a timing perspective. Number one, I'm not sure that this is the right time to have a show based around a killer virus that maybe has something to do with this comic. Maybe it doesn't. I'm guessing it probably does, but we don't know yet. I think that might be in a little bit of poor taste because it's very, very sort of realistic in that way. But then the other part that timing-wise isn't great for me is that it's sort of making folk heroes out of conspiracy theorists, which I don't think we need right now either. So, okay, I have to sort of, look, they decided to release it now, so I have to sort of grade it in that realm of, okay, this is what's happening now. This is when they decided to release it. So, it gets a couple of strikes against it for that, because I don't think it's great timing for either of those things right now. Getting entertainment from a deadly virus is a little bit, I don't know, in poor taste, I guess. But other than that, I liked a lot about this show. It's a little too gory, I think. I will admit that. But look, Amazon Prime has The Boys, so obviously we're in a different sort of era of that kind of television where we can just be as gory as we want and, have all the killings and have all the blood and all of that. I'm certainly intrigued about what is going to happen. I think I am sort of hooked from that perspective. The acting is decent. I wouldn't say it's great. Some people are better than others, but I think there's a lot of things that we also don't quite know / don't really make sense that happened in the first episode. And I'm not saying things that necessarily don't make sense because we don't know yet, but things that I think were very, very, how would I say it? Like, errors of judgment on the part of the characters. And obviously, they have to be written that way for intrigue and whatever, but sometimes when I'm watching something and the character does something that's so moronic, I'm just like, come on, like, is this the real world or what? So obviously they're trying to make this some sort of real world instance. There were a few times where I was like, that would just never happen if you're trying to do a real world type show. But aside from that, I do think it's very intriguing. The conspiracy theory, even though this is not the time, I think, to glorify conspiracy theorists, certainly narratively it could work for this show. I'm just not sure if we maybe should have waited a couple months to release it. I don't know. But yeah, overall, I think Utopia is fairly solid so far. I mean, I think it's off to a very interesting start. The comic book is come across in the first place by, this couple who inherits her dad's, or her grandfather maybe's house, and they like find it within all the hoarding and the rubbish, and they're like, what is this? This looks intriguing, so the guy looks it up, and here it is, this sort of, dark web sort of following to it. So I think all of that stuff is very intriguing, and I think this could go places. I'm just not sure now is the right time for this show. So I'm going to leave Utopia for now with a B-. I may have had other feelings if it was released, say, in January or February. I don't know. So up next, we're going to do LA's Finest. We're going to go over to Fox for our next two shows. This one actually is a show that was bought by Fox. It was on Spectrum Originals originally in 2019, and they've actually already aired 2 seasons. So, it's obviously been a success for Spectrum Originals. But this is a channel that I don't know anybody that has. It's not really a cable channel on your normal cable. I think you can only get it if you have Spectrum cable. I reviewed the Mad About You reboot like 9 months ago or something, and that's on Spectrum Originals, and it was very hard for me to track it down. I think I was only even able to do just the first episode, because it was very hard to find. So there's no doubt that this will be going to a very, very much wider audience now that it's on Fox. I mean, even if it only gets 2 or 3 million viewers, that's way more than came from Spectrum Originals, that's for sure. So this is actually a spin-off of the Bad Boys film series, which is sort of odd because, for one thing, Bad Boys for Life hadn't come out yet. I mean, we were still, this aired in like the spring of 2019, so we were still 9 months away from Bad Boys for Life being in theaters. So sort of, the timing, like Bad Boys 2 was out so long ago. I don't know if this was maybe a bid to sort of get a little bit of buzz for the Bad Boys third movie. I don't know, but it basically follows Gabrielle Union's character from those movies, Lieutenant Sidney Burnett. And she is an ex-DEA agent, which we saw in the movies, and now she's transferred to the LAPD. And she's the sister of Marcus from Bad Boys, and that's sort of where we have the spin-off part. Everybody else is very new to this, but we've got Jessica Alba in it, as well as Nancy McKenna, who is her new partner in the LAPD. Then we've got Zach Gilford, formerly of Friday Night Lights. Ernie Hudson, who plays Sid's father. So, a few people that we've seen in other things. Boy, oh boy, this show is, it's got sort of a Bad Boys flavor to it. It's got sort of a Lethal Weapon flavor to it. Any sort of buddy cop movie or TV show where the cops, are a little bit at odds with each other, but they're also friends, and they look out for each other, and they also are very corrupt and just do whatever the heck they want to do, whether it's within the law or not, as long as they get their man. So it's the latest in a very, very, very long line of those kind of shows. And because of that, it's immediately, I think, dated. I mean, this show might have been at home 15 years ago. It reminds me a lot of, like Fox was doing a lot of these types of shows back in the early 2000s. Like Fastlane is one that sticks in my mind with Tiffany Amber Thiessen, and I want to say Bill Bellamy was the guy. But, that's one. And they just had a lot of shows like this. Fox, I think, was kind of the worst with it, but we definitely got a few here and there from NBC and some other places. But then it also harkens back to things like Rizzoli and Isles, because, these are 2 women specifically, and they're kicking everybody's butt and doing things on their own terms. It's so very generic. Was it interesting? I guess mildly so. Look, I am a Gabrielle Union fan. I even like that movie Breaking In that she was in last year or the year before, where her house was getting robbed and stuff. I mean, I think Gabrielle Union is a very competent actress, but here's another timing issue where it's like Fox saw this whole season in the midst of like Black Lives Matter and the all cops are bad type things going on, and we canceled cops and we canceled live PD because cops right now are sort of under the microscope, and we don't want to maybe put them in a light where they're doing something illegal to get the job done. It's like that's all that happened in this first episode. Like the fact that Fox saw this whole season was like, yep, this is the right time for this show. There's so many other things to fill your time slots with. I just am shocked that with everything going on, Fox, maybe because Bad Boys for Life was such a big hit, maybe that's part of the reasoning. But I have to be honest, I've only seen the Bad Boys movies once each, but I didn't actually realize that this was related at all to Bad Boys. It's not like they really talk about it, and I vaguely remember that Gabrielle Union was in that movie, the second one, but she might be in all of them. I don't really remember, but I was just like, I don't. The connection is threadbare, and I didn't make the connection. So it wasn't until afterwards where I was like reading about it. I was like, oh, that kind of makes sense. She's the sister from the Bad Boys. Okay, fine. But it's not a very transparent spinoff, But look, maybe because Bad Boys for Life was such a hit, they decided let's buy this and put it on our fall schedule. To me, it didn't really work much at all. I will say, like, some of the action sequences are cool. Gabrielle Union's fine. Jessica Alba's okay. But I think this would have been in place more 15, 20 years ago, as a classic buddy cop TV show. But in 2020, it's not working for me. So I'm going to leave LA's Finest with a C-. Maybe even a D+ is more appropriate, but the action sequences were okay, and the I am going to actually leave it with a D+. I changed my mind because the whole premise of the episode was them like skirting the law to get the job done, and it's like that's the last thing we need right now, honestly. So you know what, I'm going to give it a D+. All right, so up next we're sticking with Fox for Filthy Rich. Now this is a show that was originally going to air over the summer, but because of COVID and sort of shuffling around different shows and time slots, Fox decided to hold this one for the fall when they figured they wouldn't have much original programming and see how it works there. So here we go. It stars Kim Cattrall as a widow of the husband who dies in a plane crash in the first episode. Gerald McRaney plays him, good old Major Dad from back in the day. But they are a super wealthy family that made their wealth on the whole religious zealot type thing. They have their own Christian television network, and there's all these secrets that come out within the family after Gerald McRaney's character dies. He had another family, they had 3 kids, and so everybody sort of wants to get their own hands on the money or sort of walk away from the family, divulge the family secrets. Kim Cattrall is trying to keep everything together. She plays Margaret Monroe, a TV host and co-founder of the Sunshine Network, and she's trying to control the business, keep her son from becoming CEO, and this sort of thing. So there's a bunch of infighting with the family. Look, this is not going to be highbrow television. This is not going to be up for Emmy Awards. But if you like nighttime soaps in the vein of Dallas, Knots Landing, even Desperate Housewives to some extent, this might fill the itch that you've been missing ever since really, the Aaron Spelling days of TV. I mean, this is a very, very rich, soapy type of show. And it's not as fun as Desperate Housewives. That's sort of, for me, for nighttime soaps, that's sort of my, pinnacle, at least from the last, 20, 25 years. Now, back in the day, I was a big 90210 fan. I was a little too young to watch, Dallas and Dynasty and that sort of thing. I know, obviously, about them. But, back in the 90s, early 90s heyday, you had, Melrose Place, 90210, Dallas was still on the air, I guess, up till 90 or 91, so you still had Dallas a little bit. Um, and then really nothing for quite a long time. I mean, it was really, sitcoms for most of the 90s, and then Desperate Housewives, I think, sort of revived the whole nighttime soap thing. And I don't know if that had to do with Aaron Spelling dying or what, or maybe people just being sick of the genre. But we don't see shows like this that stick around very much anymore. Like ABC had one last year called The Beauty and the Baker, and then the year before that they had one that took place on like an island at like a resort. So they sort of come and go, and I don't know if that's because they're expensive to produce, so if they don't get good ratings they're out or what. But this was a lot of fun, actually. I think Kim Cattrall could work on her southern accent a little bit, and it's interesting. I don't, this is nothing necessarily against her physical appearance, because I think that's, kind of a cheap shot. But there's all this news about, Sex and the City, is it going to get a third movie and this and that. To be honest, Kim Cattrall was known, as the sex pot of that show. And, look, she's getting up there in years. Sex and the City originally was like 25 years ago almost. She's, put on some weight. She's, getting a little bit long in the tooth. I think this kind of role is just perfect for her. It's something she can sink her teeth into. It's meaty, but she doesn't have to be a sex pot. She doesn't have to be, super, super hot. She can be the downtrodden, widow that has a ton of money, but, all these other problems. Like, I think this is the role she should be in right now. Don't worry about Sex and the City 3. The second movie was bad enough. Like, we don't need to think about it. But yeah, I think she's having a good old time here. I think the camaraderie between some of the new siblings is interesting. I think some of their storylines could turn into something, mildly amusing or engaging. I think if you're a fan of nighttime soap operas, this will hit the spot. I think if you're not, move on. This isn't going to be for you. But it was fun enough to watch. Like I said, it's not going to reinvent the wheel. It's very Aaron Spelling-esque. But I'm okay with that. It's sort of a check your brain at the door kind of thing. Plus, at this point with all the religious zealots out there, that you're kind of like, man, they should be feeding the homeless instead of buying themselves luxury planes to get around in. It makes them look very sort of foolish, and it sort of pokes fun a little bit at that lifestyle. So I think it can hit the spot for certain demographics. So I'm going to leave Filthy Rich with a B-. And again, sort of maybe even a B, but like, is it that great? No, it's not reinventing the wheel, but I did certainly have fun watching it. So up next, we're going to move to Netflix, and we're going to talk about a sitcom called Sneakerheads. Now, this is featuring Alan Maldonado, who I know from Blackish. He plays, I think, somebody at their job, at Anthony Anderson's job on Blackish, and then Andrew Batchelor is in it as well. And I've seen him in a couple things. He's mostly known for his Vine. He was like the most watched person on Vine, or subscribed to person on Vine. I didn't really do Vine when that was a thing, but basically they play sort of best friends, but Bachelor's character Bobby is sort of always getting into trouble and getting the other character Devin into trouble, and Devin's sort of grown up. He's got a family now. He's got some kids. He drives a minivan, and Bobby wants to still just kind of do his own thing and get rich quick schemes and this kind of thing. And they are sneaker aficionados to the nth degree. And so I watched 2 of the 6 episodes that Netflix has on, and essentially it's about them trying to get their no pun intended, but foot in the door in the sneaker collectible industry. And so they're doing all these wheels and deals around town, and trying to buy storage spaces full of sneakers and this and that, trying to get the latest style at the stores. So it's a lot about that, but it's more really about their camaraderie and sort of the family dynamic of Devin and this gal they meet up with, Nori, and or maybe Nori's the wife. Maybe Christine is the girl. I don't know. I'm so bad with names when I only watch like an episode or two. But anyway, they meet this gal who is sort of hot in the industry and is trying to help them out a little bit. This is an okay show. I mean, I think in 6 episodes we're not going to get enough character development for it to really matter. Like, even in the first 2 episodes, so that means I've seen now a third of the whole run so far of the first season. I mean, there's a little characterization, but not much. I think Devin is one of these guys who's like keeping Bobby around because they used to have a friendship, but like Bobby keeps screwing him over at like every turn. He doesn't mean to. He's just sort of an idea man with the ideas that go nowhere, and all that kind of stuff. So even in the first 2 episodes, they sort of get caught up in like 5 different schemes that don't pan out. So I would prefer maybe characterization over the same plot line, 3 times an episode. But I laughed a little bit. I do think the Andrew Bachelor character, his friend, is it's very, very, very like Chris Tucker in his delivery. That sort of scream joking. So that was sort of like, all right, dude, we get it. You're channeling Chris Tucker, whether he means to or not. He is. So I found that a little bit annoying. But it was an okay show. I just would have liked to have seen more character development. But it did have a few jokes. I will admit that. I don't know much about the sneaker scene. So when they really got into talking about the sneakers, I sort of am like, all right, I can assume they're saying things that are true in the real world. I have no idea in the world. But overall, I think Sneakerheads is okay. I think if you're looking for something to give you a chuckle or 2 on Netflix, you could do worse. I'll leave Sneakerheads with a C+. I think it's sort of right there on that line. All right, so up next we've got Kal Penn approves this message, and this is something I mentioned in the news portion about a month ago that Freeform was going to be doing this. And of course, Kal Penn has a huge political history in the real world because he worked with President Obama and his cabinet and stuff. And essentially, this is a platform where there's no specific lean politically. They just are trying to get you out to vote. That's sort of the basis for it. But look, it's on Freeform, where every show has a gay character. And there's, all these diverse shows on Freeform. Grownish is on there, and The Bold Type. Look, anybody that watches Freeform, I think, is for the most part not going to be a Trump supporter. They're not going to be a hardcore Republican. So even though this particular show might not have any lean, and I even think that's not true, because, I mean, their guest in the second episode was Hillary Clinton. She's a bit polarizing, and they even talk a little bit about her being polarizing. But look, I think the people that watch Freeform, if they get something out of this, it will hopefully be to register to vote. My gut says that most people that are watching this are already registered because they're already politically minded. Like, I don't know, we don't live in a society anymore where there's only 3 or 4 channels. You watch what's on. Like, this could have been a show on ABC 25 years ago, and I think it would have had a much different impact. Because people may have stumbled across it and like, oh, that's the guy from Harold and Kumar, and watched it from that. But, in this day and age, is it going to change any minds? I don't know. But that being said, I certainly learned things. I keep myself politically minded, certainly in an election year. But I watched the first 2 episodes, and I certainly learned a few things. There are a few tidbits of knowledge that they lay out there. Basically, this is an unscripted show. Now, Kal Penn, I'm sure, sort of has his own script a bit, but he does interviews and things like that, some comedic field pieces, which are okay. The one in the first episode, it was all right. But, basically each episode is going to be about a different topic. So the first one was essentially about the youth vote and the 26th Amendment, which this is some stuff I didn't know, that that you used to have to be 21 to vote back when my parents were alive. Like, it wasn't 100 years ago, it was like 50 years ago. I didn't know that. And in the 70s, I think he said early 70s, is when it changed to 18. So who knew? Not me. Maybe you did. And then in the second episode, they were talking more about education and the benefits of going to trade school, and how, back in the day, up till maybe 10, 15 years ago, everybody was like college, college, college. But now college is so expensive that you could make, a whole lot of money just going to a trade school and learning, HVAC or something like that, or plumbing or electrician. And, there you go. And so there's that sort of divide now of like parents still have that mindset, but kids are saying, well, maybe we can just go to trade school. So, there's some interesting knowledge there again. And I thought the, interview with Hillary Clinton was good. I'm a fan of hers, so, if people that aren't, like, that's why when they say, like, oh, we don't have any political specific lean to the show, that's fine, but, like, are you going to interview Mitt Romney? Probably not, So I don't know. So I don't necessarily agree with that part, but I did get some things out of it. I don't know if anybody that watches this show isn't already registered to vote. But hopefully, like me, at least they'll learn something in the process. So I'm going to leave Kal Penn Approves This Message with a B. And there's 3 episodes left of that on Freeform. So finally, we have a new talk show. We talked last week on the Wilmore Show on Peacock. Well, they have another new talk show, the Amber Ruffin Show. And I wasn't too familiar with her. I guess I had sort of heard the name before, or maybe just seen it in credits or what have you. But she is one of Seth Meyers' main writers for his late night show. And just like Wilmore, this is going to have 9 episodes airing once a week on Peacock. It's going to feature no guests, at least not for the first 2 episodes. It's just her in a studio doing basically, some monologues, some sketches, and that's it. Like there's no interview portion, like on Wilmore. There's no guests. Now she does have a sort of co-host, I guess you could say, or side, side host. Like an Andy Richter sidekick that kind of goes back and forth with her. But since it's being filmed sort of in the present, there's no studio audience, and they've said that they maybe would like to add a studio audience, after these 9 episodes if it gets a second season and COVID's done. But for now, it's just kind of her in a studio. A lot of things don't work about this show. I will say that Ruffin herself is energetic. She can be funny, but I sense that maybe the best jokes are being saved for Seth Meyers and his late night show. He's an executive producer of this too. So, it's possible that if she comes up with a joke, they could be like, oh, okay, well, maybe you could do this on your show. I'll do this one. And certainly, look, Seth Meyers is a white dude. She's a black woman. So she obviously can bring a little bit of a unique perspective of the things that Seth sometimes can't, depending on the joke. But, to me, the first episode of this was a crash course in just like handing a person a camera and saying, go do a show. Like there were a bunch of technical malfunctions and they just like breezed right over them. They didn't talk about them. She's, stumbled a lot while she was talking. And look, I'm not perfect. I say a lot. Sometimes I, stumble over words. I say, a lot. Everybody's sort of got their crutch, but I also don't have a show on Peacock. I do a show on YouTube that gets like 30 people to watch. So kind of apples and oranges, I want to say. But I think with a little refinement, this could be something more solid. But for now, it's sort of a train wreck. Like, it reminds me of when I would have my friends over in high school. One of my friends had a camcorder, because this was obviously before smartphones and everything could do video. Smartphones didn't exist. But he would bring his video camera over and we would film like little sketches and stuff. And they were honestly probably pretty awful, Like, we thought they were real clever and funny at the time. This, to me, harkens back to that. Like, it's like Seth Meyers was like, oh, Amber, you're kind of funny. Here's a video camera. Go do a show. And then without a lot of planning, she just kind of did one. Like, I don't know. It just seemed very, very amateurish. I always sort of grade talk shows on a curve, because when you're first starting out, unless you've done a lot of talk shows before, if Oprah started up a new show, wouldn't grade her on a curve. But if you've never done a talk show before, I like to grade you on a little bit of a curve. But for all the first-time talk shows I've done in the last year that I've been doing this, we did Kelly Clarkson, we did Drew Barrymore, we did Anthony Jeselnik. Larry Wilmore did have his own show before, so I didn't really grade him on a curve. But this is easily the most unprofessional and, not childish, but it just seems like it was a demo show. Like they should have presented this to Seth Meyers to say, hey, do you want to produce our show? It'll be something like this, but much more cleaned up. So I leave the Amber Ruffin Show with a D+. I think she is very, very energetic. I wish that translated into better jokes and a better show, but for now, unfortunately, it does not. So that's going to wrap it up for TV news and reviews for this week. I did it. I got it under 45 minutes. I've been, trying. I tried to do it under 45 minutes. The last few weeks have had a lot of news going on. We had the Emmys, and last week we had a bunch of other stuff to talk about, and all of this. So we're out. We will be back next week with another episode of TV news and reviews. I say we, but it's clearly just me. So I will be back. With the new TV news and review show. But we also have The Masked Singer this week, of course. That's been getting a lot of buzz on my channel. Tim and I will be doing another Disney video soon for a review of a movie. And I think I'm going to watch, speaking of movies, I think I'm going to review Hubie Halloween on Netflix as a standalone movie review. Sometimes I do those when I think something's pretty big. And, a new Adam Sandler movie that's #1 on Netflix, that's pretty big, I guess. So I may give that one its own private review. But anyway, subscribe below if you haven't yet. We've got these nice little handy-dandy buttons now that you can click to subscribe. And you can also watch this other video that I've picked out. It's another TV news and reviews video that maybe you'll be interested in. So check those out if you want. Subscribe, all that jazz. And thanks for watching. We'll see you next time.